Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Dean Rutherford, wonderful words, and I certainly accept on behalf of my UALR colleagues who were here the nice things that were said about the institution's cooperation and partnership with the Clinton School. That's real, and we're proud of it. I should first say thanks to Dr. Williams, the Center on Community Philanthropy, Dean Rutherford, for inviting me to be here this week. It's really been a wonderful experience. It's been great to meet and spend time with the students. It's also been nice to be away from just almost all of the concerns of the campus. So it has really been an honor and a pleasure to be here. I also want to say congratulations to the students of the Clinton School. First, congratulations on your admission. That says something good about you. Every time I'm down here on the premises, I'm just pretty sure that somewhere in the building there is a student that's going to be a world changer, and it may very well be you. I congratulate you and commend you on your commitment to service. And Dean Rutherford, I would have to say that I think probably most people in this audience know the school has the distinction of offering the first and only Master of Public Service degree anywhere. You have that to be very proud of. There is the speaker series mentioned just a few minutes ago, which has just been splendid. And these outreach programs within the state that students are involved in that were mentioned earlier, those are all wonderful. So you're making the state and the city proud in very many ways. Lots of friends here. It's nice to see you. Appreciate it. Appreciate Congressman Snyder's being here. He's not former yet. He's still our sitting working congressman, and it's an honor to have him in the audience today. I want to recognize one other group that's here, and they're scattered, and I'll just have them hold their hands up in a moment, but there is a Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity. They're actually listed on the back of the card that you find at your table there, and a few of them are here with you today, but I want to tell you that the Institute did not spring full-grown from the mind of Zeus. This particular group of people that I'm mentioning here have been the people that have given birth to it. So if you're a member of the Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity, just sort of raise your hand. Let me see who's here. And anyway, thank you for being here as well. Here's the story on that group. Some 3.5 years ago, I just put out a call on campus that I would like to meet with faculty and staff members that had a particular interest in this issue, and so it just sort of happened. It was voluntary. These people were not appointed. They were not obliged to show up, but they did. And as a result of that, I think we are doing something at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock that fits into and gives focus to pathways to promoting racial equity and healing, which is a new focus of the center that I commend you for. To understand the development of the Institute on Race and Ethnicity at UALR, you have to first of all understand that UALR is a metropolitan university, an engaged university, and one that has embraced its community. We see ourselves as partners with the community, and I am just always amazed at the number of departments across campus, faculty members, and students in a variety of programs that in one way or another are out in the community and connecting their university skills, expertise, experience, or their classroom assignments to things that are going on in the community. But in a sense, from my point of view, one of the good things about that is that these sorts of activities also enrich the university. They very much enrich the experience that students have on campus. So there is an element of self-interest involved here. We've been involved with the community in addressing a good number of major community issues, and some of you in the room would be familiar with one or more of these, and this is important to something I'm going to be saying later, so I want just to mention that people at UALR at one time or another have been involved in the problems in education in the city, transportation, the wastewater utility, community revitalization, economic development, permanently resolving a recurring dispute about drinking water between Little Rock and North Little Rock, increasing the supply of nurses, and bringing an engineering school to Little Rock. All of these in response to community needs or community requests. Now, according to Dr. Williams and the Center on Community Philanthropy is defined as the giving of time, talent, and treasure that, when invested locally, is characteristic of positive change and lasting development. And I would submit to you that a metropolitan university like UALR, because of its deep involvement in the community and these kinds of issues that I just mentioned, is constantly engaged in community philanthropy. In that, the university shares its time of very talented people, but shares its time, its talent, and its treasure, and works with the community in addressing significant community issues. We try very hard to avoid the appearance of, being from the government, tapping you on the shoulder and letting you know that we're here to help you. It's a joint thing. It's a working with. It's a not, doing to somebody. And we do this, as I've said on many occasions, because we know that if the community prospers, the university prospers. And if the community suffers, the university suffers. Now, the development of the Institute reflects the conviction that the issues of race and ethnicity that strongly affect the community and the state affect the university no less. We're not an island unto ourselves. Moreover, in addressing race and ethnicity, the university will not only discharge its obligation to prepare future citizens to live in a complex and diverse world, it will not only assist in advancing the community and the state beyond old prejudices and practices that debilitate people and communities, but the Institute will also expand learning and research and service opportunities for faculty and students. So again, it represents valuable service to the community that serves our self-interest. We're not an island unto ourselves. Well, in short, what I'm trying to say to this point is that the planning process and the resulting design of the Institute reflect the values and the assumptions of community philanthropy as they have been articulated by the center here. Now, I want to ask a question. Why establish an Institute on Race and Ethnicity? Is there a problem? Well, I should think that persons who are present here today, most from the Little Rock metro area, know that our community on both sides of the river is divided in many major respects along lines of race. You see it in housing, education, employment, income, health, the governing boards, the criminal justice system, and so on. In fact, I would say that in virtually every significant challenge that the state of Arkansas faces, the sorts of things that you hear governors talking about, that you hear legislators talking about, that you hear agency heads talking about, every one of them is entangled with the issue of race in one way or another. So I think, in a sense, the answer to the question is self-evident. But let me give you some evidence of a different kind. For 7 years, UALR has conducted an annual survey of racial attitudes in Pulaski County. We've done this to keep the issue in front of the community. When the 8th one is done, and it may already be done, if it's not, it's still in the field. It'll be reported in March this coming spring. But there will have been some 225 different items that will have been a part of those surveys, and they've covered all kinds of topics, including local government and education, health, religion, trust, public safety, housing, and more. And they've been a kind of mirror of the community from which we certainly can learn some things. They've certainly documented that there are a lot of things that African Americans and whites have in common in terms of the way they see and believe and perceive things. But the surveys also reveal that there are significant differences. I'm pleased to tell you that in the first 7 years, whereas the survey has been interested to African Americans and whites, this year we added the Latino population to it. So that will be a new and a continuing aspect of the survey, and I am really looking forward to seeing what we learn from that addition to the annual survey. But any event, three quick examples from the surveys. In March 2005, our researchers asked people in the survey, here this is in Pulaski County, what their reactions were to the high-profile trial that had just taken place recently, where Coach Nolan Richardson, basketball coach at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, had sued the university. Well, the results showed that the split in opinion in Pulaski County on that issue was rather like it was nationally after the O.J. Simpson trial. In our case, there were 70% of African Americans that were sympathetic with Coach Richardson, but only 20% of white respondents were sympathetic with Nolan Richardson. Now that is a drastic difference in perception and reaction to a particular event that had a race issue embedded in it. Then another one, and the one that we've asked 3 times, I say we gratuitously, no, I didn't actually do that myself, but in any event, 3 times there has been a question to this effect, and you answer the phone, you're in the survey, and the question is, during the last 30 days, from the time you're talking there on the phone, have you experienced unfair treatment because of your race in just the ordinary things you do living here in Pulaski County, such as at work, going shopping, going out to eat, to a place of entertainment, in dealings with the police, and so on. And in each of those 3 years, when that has been asked, the African American respondents have had some half of them every year have reported that in at least one of those, and some of them reported in more than one, but if you just total up those that have chosen at least one of those as an area in which they have experienced discriminatory treatment, it's 50%. And the first time we did that, and I saw that response, I was just really shocked. And I think that it's the sort of thing that is a kind of wake-up call. It shows us that while we may have made progress in a lot of areas, we're still not where we want to be. I think we would all agree with that. And then the third one, and this is just a quotation that I came across in one of the reports, the one in 2006, our researchers wrote, quote, "Blacks and whites," and I want you to notice the adjective, "have enormous differences in perceptions about whether blacks are treated the same as whites." So I answer the question, there is a problem here in our community that needs attention, and the election of President Barack Obama has not moved the nation or the state or the community into the post-racial era. And race is in every sense a strategic issue for the community and for the state, and I'm pleased to say that UALR is not really a newcomer to this issue. It was one of the 3 areas that I myself identified for focus when I was inaugurated as chancellor in 2003. And some 2 years later, the campus released a strategic plan, and there were 7 pledges to external stakeholders in our strategic plan. And one of them was that the university would be a keeper of the flame on the issue of race. And I think we have lived up true to that. So we're not newcomers to the issue. And then again, the core planning group, the Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity that just sort of came into existence, has been talking about, meeting, discussing, reading things, bringing in outsiders on a weekly basis for some 3.5 years now. So it is one of the things that has been on the ULR radar screen for a long, long time. Now, an Institute on Race and Ethnicity, our Monday afternoon group, that's just the Chancellor's Committee on Race and Ethnicity, we concluded 1.5 years or so ago that what the university needed to do with regard to the issue of race was establish an institute on race and ethnicity, and that would serve several purposes. One of them, it would be a powerful symbol of the university's commitment. An institute also would be a place where the university could build strength and focus resources and develop a center of excellence at the university. And an institute would also be a good vehicle for connecting with individuals and organizations in the community that also are attacking racial and ethnic prejudice and discrimination. Now, before I go further, I want to just stop right here and confess that I have a pet peeve on this subject. And the peeve is this, the statement that you hear from time to time that you cannot rid the community, let alone the world, of racism. It's just part of the human condition. Now, that statement bothers me. I don't like that at all. And I will tell you that the human condition is a reality. It's a given. We cannot change it. And selfishness and conflict and anger and greed and stealing and killing and fear and sorrow and envy and lust and laziness and fear and uncertainty and death, these are all here to stay. They're part of the human condition. Fortunately, so are love and altruism, longing, a quest for purpose. These also are here to stay. But the human condition, very serious and challenging to cope with. No matter where we are, we're enveloped within it, but racism is not a part of it. It's not prevalent in all societies. It would be if it were a part of the human condition. Racism is first and foremost attitudes, which then are followed by actions that are negative and discriminatory based on race. And it can become ingrained in a community, structural or institutional racism. But attitudes, which is the beginning point, we absorb from those around us. Racism is something we get through the socialization that we go through. Very little children do not see a color line. Now, they're just not born with that notion. But children that are not so little do begin to see a color line. They are taught it in subtle and not so subtle ways. So to take on racism may be daunting, but it's not tilting at windmills. It is not an effort to escape the human condition. Oscar Hammerstein's lyrics in You've Got to Be Carefully Taught from South Pacific, I think, are relevant here. Let me read them. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Now, isn't that on target? I think that it is. Let me move on and let's talk a moment about the mission. If you look on your card, we've got it reprinted there. It's brief. I don't remember how many meetings it took us and how much blood there was on the floor each week as our group developed the mission statement, but I think it's ended up being pretty well crafted. The mission of the Institute on Race and Ethnicity is to seek racial and ethnic justice in Arkansas by remembering and understanding the past, informing and engaging the present, and shaping and defining the future. I think that has a nice rhythm to it. And the mission statement suggests the focus of the Institute. It has to do with race and ethnicity. And so that means there are a lot of things that are out there that it's not dealing with. And as a practical matter in Arkansas, the major groups are white and black, and then Latino, Hispanic. Those are the 3 most significant ones. And then there are certainly others that deserve to be recognized, and that certainly projects and activities that relate to them and issues that pertain to their ethnicity will certainly be welcome and be a part. But the primary focus, the primary emphasis, just in terms of the significance, the weight within the life of the state, would be the white, black, Latino, Hispanic would be the areas of focus. Now, I want to take a moment and point out that there are some key premises of the planning group. One We start with a point of view, and it actually is reflected in the very beginning of the mission statement there. We start with a point of view. We start with the strong conviction that racial and ethnic prejudice and discrimination exist, that racial and ethnic justice has not been achieved. So the moral issue is settled. Racism exists, and it's wrong, it's sinful, it's evil, and we aren't indifferent. We make the optimistic assumption that undergirds every democratic system that people, particularly people of goodwill, with the benefit of good information and thoughtful discussion, can develop constructive responses to the problems they face. You have to make that assumption, it seems to me. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it holds, but in any event, you have to make that optimistic assumption in a democratic system. We can achieve change. The problem we face is large, and the roots are broad and deep. We will mount a broad-based, long-term effort to eliminate it. The university is an anchor institution in our community that has the advantages, and hear these. I think these are important to pay attention to. Advantages of the university: stability, longevity, prestige. The university can serve as a convener. It's a safe place for discussion of sensitive topics. It boasts marvelous human resources, faculty, staff, and students with relevant expertise across many academic disciplines. So we will invest our resources in the community. But the community boasts formidable resources, including organizations, governmental, religious, nonprofit, business, that also are at work to eliminate racial and ethnic prejudice and discrimination. And we've witnessed the wisdom and experience they bring to the cause, and we want them to keep doing what they are doing. So we will partner with people and organizations in our community to strengthen their efforts and to strengthen our own in the process. Institute goals. I want to make a few comments under each of these, and these are succinctly stated also on the crowd that you have in front of you there. But let me say, before I say something specifically about Goal 1, that I believe that what distinguishes the institute that we're putting in place from the 4 on other campuses that have been visited by members of the committee is that the one that we're planning reflects a broad-based approach. It is a comprehensive model, if you will. I might also sort of say parenthetically, I think it also is different from the others in the extent to which it is and already and will be integrated into the academic fabric of the university. But the 6 goals embody this broad-based approach. Terms like multi-pronged, multifaceted, interdisciplinary, broad-based. I think those are good descriptors of the Institute. Well, let's look at the 6 goals, and keep in mind that as I stand here today, the Institute is a work in progress, and we don't claim to have all of the answers in advance. We've done a lot of planning, so we're not just going to be making it up as we go along, but we certainly will learn and adjust as we do go along. Well, Goal 1 has to do with sustained awareness. The first barrier to overcome, in our experience, is that many people just don't believe there's a problem. There's indifference. Or if they concede that there might be a problem, they don't want to talk about it. There's a code of silence at work in our community with regard to race and ethnicity. Over the time that we've done these 7 surveys of racial attitudes in Pulaski County, by and large, they've been well received. I've not gotten all that many complaints and criticisms about them. I have gotten some, but the most common one has been the following. Joel, why don't you just leave it alone? Why reopen old wounds? Well, the reality is that the wounds aren't healed. But in any event, it's an obstacle to overcome, the fact that people just aren't aware of it or don't want to deal with it. So The Institute will continue the annual survey and the conference on racial attitudes. We will also use speakers, special events, the media, including our own television and radio stations on campus, to keep the issues of race and ethnicity in front of the people. The theme of the survey each year has been, you have to face it to fix it. And that may be, we believe it is, barrier one. Second goal, to provide research-based information and informed policy recommendations. This is really very important. You have to be able to see the problem clearly if you're going to solve it. And the research capability of faculty and students spanning multiple disciplines is perhaps the unique strength, the unique asset of the university as compared with other stakeholders who bring other important assets to the cause. We plan for there to be a limited number of full-time researchers on the staff of the Institute itself. And then I anticipate that literally dozens of faculty across campus will affiliate with the Institute as faculty associates, greatly expanding the available and involved expertise. In my observation, and I think this is just undeniable, one impediment. Do you ever feel that way about your own opinions, that they're just really undeniable? Well, that's the way I feel about this one. That one of the main impediments in developing good public policy in Arkansas is the absence of relevant and good data and information. And at our planning retreat, we had a planning retreat at Fayetteville, at Pettygene last summer, and the proposition surfaced there that the Institute should periodically, and that might be annually, biennially, every 5 years, that would yet to be determined, issue a report on the state of minorities in Arkansas, which would be a treasure trove of data. And there are models already out there, particularly at the national level. The Statistical Abstract of the United States, census reports, the National Urban League issues a regular State of Black America. The Annie E. Casey Foundation, of course, some of you would be familiar with the kids count. These are all examples that come to mind of something that the state would benefit from with regard to race and ethnicity. I can just have to emphasize the need for good data and research with a reference to structural racism. I think that one of the reasons that people are not interested in structural racism, they just don't get it, is that we don't have the information and the data that we need in order to paint a good picture of it. I'd be optimistic that a lot of people people of goodwill would take it seriously and respond, but what we so often do is just simply talk about it and make everybody feel bad about it, and we describe a serious negative, but we don't have good solutions to offer to it. We can speak in generalities, we can cite national data, but those can be pretty easily dismissed if you're a policymaker at the state or the local level in Arkansas. So we need to be able to describe local problems and opportunities in sound and relevant data. And I think that would be a great contribution to the state, and that's an area in which the Institute will provide leadership. I'll mention in passing, we also envision a role for the Institute in developing a repository for civil rights research in Arkansas. Goal 3 has to do with building bridges, and reconciliation, and dialogue. People understand each other better, what they have in common and what they do not, if they sit around a table and talk face to face. The William F. Winter Institute on Racial Reconciliation at the University of Mississippi, one of the 4 that members of the committee visited, has an outstanding record in dialogue and reconciliation events in a number of Mississippi communities with horrible civil rights crimes that occurred during the 20th century. And we certainly foresee a role here for us. We've already heard from 2 communities that have expressed possible interest in some kind of assistance from the university on some circumstances in their communities. We'll see. That's one of those cases where you have to be invited in, and you've got to have the necessary people willing to come to the table. We can learn a lot from their experience in Mississippi. We need conversation, we need dialogue, yet honest conversations about discrimination and injustice, particularly across racial and ethnic lines, are not easy. That's one reason why people don't want to talk. It takes trust and a long-term commitment. But I think there is an additional reason for dialogue. I found through my own experience in working on some community issues, some of which I mentioned earlier, that when you get out and talk to people, particularly if they are really on the front line and trying to deal with the problem, and they may even be people, down in the trenches, they often have the answers to the problem. Sometimes they don't even know it. But my experience has been you can have those conversations and sometimes you just hear a gem of insight, or there's some kind of framing of the issue that then makes it possible to take that and move forward. So in tackling such a serious and daunting issue, we need to go where a lot of the understanding is and take advantage of that. Goal 4, students. We're going to be providing formal study opportunities for students as well as a lot of informal opportunities for students. The future lies with young people, and we're quite confident that a significant interest will be present among our students in being involved with the Institute. A subcommittee of the Committee on Race and Ethnicity is at work developing a minor in racial and ethnic studies, something in the neighborhood of 18 or 21 hours that then one could pair with a major in engineering or English or business, whatever else one might be interested in. We're confident that that will be a really valuable addition to our curriculum. But students will also have opportunities to be involved with our faculty members in research projects out of the Institute as well as public programs of the Institute. 5th goal, information clearinghouse. As a service to stakeholders in the community and around the state who are addressing problems of race and ethnicity, the Institute will provide an information clearinghouse, web-based, including not only reports and publications, but also a calendar of events related to racial and ethnic issues. And goal 6, accountability. There's been a strong interest on the part of members of the committee in seeing that the Institute has a role in holding UALR accountable on these very subjects, emphasizing that in order to lead, the university must have its own house in order. And then this view, the importance of this, was reinforced by the participants at the planning summit at Petit last July. So to that end, we will review our current policies and practices. We'll, on an ongoing basis, monitor our recruitment and retention data and survey our employees and students. We'll also have a broad-based campus diversity council. Now, those are the 6 goals and some very brief comments that give you a sense of the the scope of activities that we have in mind. As I said earlier, they really constitute a quite broad set of activities. And this brings me back to my earlier reference to the project that led to the merger of the Little Rock and North Little Rock water utilities. In that particular project back in 2000, the University Task Force gave the 2 cities, and I want you to hear me say this, a solution that fit the size of the problem. That's often one of our failings. We got a problem and we come up with a good solution, but it's just not big enough. It's not equal to the problem that needs to be undertaken or solved. So the recommendation in the water study surprised the officials of both cities that they merged their water utilities. And then I will confess that the 2 cities surprised the university by accepting and implementing the recommendation. But not only did that solution remove a recurring and contentious local issue that came around in a very serious near litigation way about every 10 years, but it also set the stage for the water utilities, not just in Little Rock and North Little Rock, but for the water utilities in central Arkansas, from Greer's Ferry Lake down to DeGray Lake, to begin to cooperate to address long-term water needs of the whole region. In short, there was a big solution for a big problem. So that explains why we have ended up with an ambitious set of 6 goals, not just one. Small solutions do not resolve large problems, and in our judgment, we need a full court press in order to make a difference in our city and then in our state in any reasonably short period of time. Well, I want to end on a hopeful note. The Institute has been developed with the help of both campus and community stakeholders. I want to emphasize that the problem, racial and ethnic prejudice and discrimination, both at the personal level and the institutional and structural level, is a community problem that will require a community solution. It's not a problem the university can solve. The university and other community stakeholders must invest time, talent, and treasure working together for success. And I'm here today to tell you the university will do its part. On the one hand, to sound just a little bit pessimistic, I see the problem as broader and deeper and more consequential than many citizens do, particularly those that don't want to talk about it. And on occasion, I've warned, and will do so again, I'm sure, that countries can go backwards. They can lose ground. They can go from better to worse, as Germany did in the first half of the 20th century, and as indeed our own country did between the end of the Civil War and then the coming of the Jim Crow era in American history. Things can go backwards. On the other hand, I think there are signs that the time is ripe for this institute, that the time is ripe for some perceptible progress on the issue of race. I detect a change in attitudes, just to give you one example, about the crisis at Central High in 1957. For several decades, it was viewed by local leaders and citizens as a negative and embarrassing event. However, Little Rock was the place where our country, through 9 of this city's children, supported by courageous families and friends, turned a corner, passed a very significant milestone, and became a more free and just nation. And that's something to be proud of. That's something to celebrate. What happened at Central High was historic, and the Little Rock community must now define for itself how those events should inform our present attitudes and shape our community's future. Another hopeful sign. I've made reference to the planning summit for the Institute last summer at Pettygene. Now, this may strike you as a pretty small example, but I think it just may be significant. The attendees there, 40 people said they would come. 20 of them were representatives of the university, and 20 of them were community participants. And I'm here to tell you that 39 of them showed up, and the 40th had a medical emergency. Now, it's been a long, long time. In fact, I don't think I've ever been involved in something like that where you had that kind of attendance on the part of those who said they would be participants. Some folks were having to take vacation days. They had to go up to Pettygene for 2 days in order to participate in it. It's an impressive turnout. Was it the subject? I think it was. And if so, I think that's significant. Something else. There are fine nonprofit organizations that are active on the race and ethnicity front here in our community. Just Communities of Arkansas, the Martin Luther King Commission, the Little Rock Racial and Cultural Diversity Commission, the Nehemiah Network, City Connections, and leaders of a good number of religious congregations. And I'm glad to say that there's a good spirit of cooperation among them, and certainly the university is proud of the cooperation that takes place there. I think that's a hopeful sign. The Little Rock Regional Chamber of Commerce, following a county-wide planning process that was funded by 50 for the Future, a group of influential business leaders, has set up a task force that is focusing attention on this issue. And some of the aforementioned groups are a part of participating in the Chamber's initiative there. I think that's a hopeful sign. The response to this program today was strong. Now, I'll take it on the word of the people that run the show here that this is an unusually good turnout today. Why? Well, was it the subject? I think it probably was. And if it was, I think that's significant. I think that's encouraging. I believe this community is ready to begin a fresh new agenda on the subject of race and ethnicity, embraced by a broad spectrum of Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, everybody in the community. And the Institute is going to serve as the university's main vehicle for providing time, talent, and treasure in effecting change and lasting development toward racial justice. It won't become, the Institute won't become full-grown overnight. I want to say very clearly that we need your help in making it the full reality we've dreamed. We need you to invest your time, talents, and treasure in the Institute. And as we all address issues of race and ethnicity, we're going to be counting on you to stand up with us. I'd be glad to respond to questions.
All right. Okay, we're going to have some questions. Could I wait till the microphone gets to you first, so we can.
Hi, Dr. Anderson. My name is Naomi Rogers. I'm Native Korean. And I congratulate and then I salute and praise for good work. However, I have one question. You said, obviously this one, we really want to promote that multi-ethnicity and diversity, and yet you said right now that all the committees African American, and you said the third you added for Latino. And as a Korean and Asian, I'm just wondering, are you have any plan to add Asian committee?
Well, it's not a matter of adding. In a sense, everybody is already there. If we had, for instance, a student who was particularly interested in a research project that related to issues, problems, concerns that Korean Americans faced, we would say, you know, that's great. And I would be optimistic that there'd be a member of our faculty that would be quite interested in working with them. I have no doubts that we will have faculty members who will have research expertise in an area that does not involve, you know, whites, blacks, Latinos, but maybe Marshallese or Vietnamese, and we will be very enthusiastic about whatever they do. The point that I was attempting to make was that in terms of moving the state of Arkansas forward, the focus, the priority, the primary attention will be in the area where the biggest problem is, and that has to do with, you know, white, black, and now Latino, Hispanic. But we love international students. We love people who have heritages that are diverse, and I think you'll be pleased with the way that will play out.
Okay, we have a question here from Congressman Snyder.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I'm right over here, Doctor. There you go. I'm not quite sure how to ask this. It seems like there's two aspects of historically where human beings get in trouble. One of them is our very healthy ability to see differences, and you just refer to that, the enrichment that comes from experiencing different cultures and different languages and hearing different voices and styles of singing or whatever it is. But then there's also the possible darker side of how people respond to those differences. And historically, over the last 3 or 4 or 5 centuries, what got the predecessors of African Americans in trouble was the willingness of certain people to say, you know, we can make a lot of money if we'll just go grab people on the continent and ship them and sell them. It's that the propensity for, I mean, which is just this incredibly dark evil. Within the last year, there was a presentation in D.C. on the sexual slavery and sexual exploitation that's going on in the United States. And there was a panel of folks who had been caught up in that. And one of them was an Asian woman who just coincidentally, I don't think she made any appearance here, had spent some time in Little Rock, came out at the forum. So my question is, where does this terrible propensity of some human beings through history fit into this discussion, this willingness to say, I don't care if you're black, white, or whatever, if I can sell you, whether you're a young Bosnian woman or a young Russian woman coming out of a very difficult economic situation, if I can sell you in any way for doing cotton work 300 years ago or for sexual slavery in the United States today, I will do that. Does that fit into this discussion?
Well, I think it underlies the problem. You've all opened up a really large topic there. In some ways, the motive that I heard you mentioning in 2 or 3 instances there was greed, and I think that is a part of the human condition. And I think that it's one of the reasons why we need a full court press and we need everybody involved in that. One of the groups, and this certainly does not solve the problem. In some ways, I think a problem like that you only mitigate. You just keep trying to diminish it. But we need all of the religious organizations to be active in addressing these issues, and I think that's one of the things that the Institute will succeed in encouraging more of. I think that's an important element of it, but no easy answer, and I think part of the response is simply the full court press. You just work on the problem on as many fronts as you can.
All right. Have a question right here. Yes, ma'am. Right there. Yeah, it's you.
While the mic's moving, I will just say that I was hoping to talk to Congressman Snyder after the meeting about a congressional earmark for the Institute, but that may be a little late.
Joel, I'm glad you're for earmarks.
Thank you very much for this. I'm Deanne Newell, and I'm a former Senior Justice Fellow of the Soros Foundation, and I spent 2 years from 2006 to 2008 working on behalf of children of incarcerated parents, and a lot of our initiatives were around institutional and systemic racism. And I very much want to salute you for doing this and ask and beg you to pay attention to the role of criminal justice and the role of racial disparities and institutional racism that is alive and well and thriving in that system. And I am also come from a restorative justice background, and I think the elements of restorative justice, which have to do with respect, truth, real truth, reconciliation, and relationships, is very, very relevant to what you are starting off to do. And I cannot tell you thank you enough.
Well, thank you, and I'm pleased to tell you that among the members of our Monday afternoon group, our Committee on Race and Ethnicity, one of the regulars has been a member of our criminal justice faculty, and the issues that you mentioned have been a topic of discussion a number of times. Full spectrum. In fact, you've got some folks from the committee behind you that could elaborate.
Questions? Yes, ma'am, right up here. Here you go. Yeah, he's coming with the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. My name is Kitty Chisholm. I have 2 questions. One is just if you could just tell us where these other institutes are and if they've accomplished.
Where they are, yes, I could name them. I mentioned the one at Ole Miss, the William F. Winter Institute, which has a focus on racial reconciliation, although they're in the process of broadening that. There was the Benjamin Hooks Center at the University of Memphis. That one tends to have a bit more of a archival recording or preserving of the history of the civil rights movement, as Benjamin Hooks, who of course was the head of the NAACP for many years. Then there were two at the University of Minnesota. One was in the law school, and I think it was the Center or Institute on Race and Poverty. And then over in the Hubert Humphrey Institute, there was the, somebody help me with the name, somebody that went on the trip. Roy Brooks. No, not Roy Brooks. That's a former superintendent. Thank you, Roy Wilkins. Yes, you know, one of the civil rights icons. In any event, that was another one of the institutes, and I think one of the challenges that each of the four of them had was that they had a fairly narrow base on the campus. They did not have any kind of sustaining group like this 15 or 16 member Chancellor's Committee on Race and an interdisciplinary group. And I think that as a result, and this is just an impression, is that their roots in the academic fabric of the institution are fairly shallow. And so I think that how stable and effective they'll be long run is a good question. But
We have time for one more question. Oh, go ahead, Kitty. Go ahead. Please talk to the mic.
I was really empathetic to Naomi's question, and I would also ask if the Institute is going to pay much attention to the racial ethnicity issue that is before us right now, which is engendering an awful lot of fear, and that is our fears of the Middle Eastern, judging people by the dress that they wear, the way they look, and the way they appear. Is that going to be on your agenda at all?
Well, sort of no and yes. And no in the sense that we made a conscious decision to focus on Arkansas, and with an emphasis right here at home. We have to start there. And part of the rationale for that was that it would take a mighty resource base to take on the issue nationally. And the issue, in a sense, is different there. It's broader, it's less black and white, for instance, at the national level than it is here. But where we can make a difference, and remember, UALR is a tax-supported institution, tax-supported by the people of Arkansas. So for a number of reasons, we thought it was appropriate and practical and rational to have a focus that was close to home. I do think, now here's where the yes comes from, that in the process of addressing the at-home issues, that it does help the broader environment for, if it's ethnic discrimination, against Asians or, people from the Middle East or wherever, or people of a different religion. I think that at least indirectly the Institute will be helpful, but that's in a sense not a part of the formal agenda as we have constructed it.
We do have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am, right here.
Good afternoon, Chancellor. My name is Kenya Gordon, and I'm a student at the Bowen Law School. My question is, have you and your committee thought anything about your measure of success? I agree with you that it's something that can be fixed, but if you could talk a little bit about how you're going to measure that the Institute is actually successful.
We will probably have to do that in concrete terms when we submit a first grant application, but I would be telling a fib if I told you that we have developed measures of success.
Chancellor, let me take a point here to point out this group in the red jackets, which you're familiar with,
Yes.
but I think we ought to give a great shout out to a great program. It does a lot of work with kids that sit here. And then from a point of personal privilege here, I want to, if you haven't met Clinton School alumnus Harvell Howard, he's working on an African American male initiative at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock.
That's right.
Get him involved in your program because he's one of the very best. He's a good guy and can really help. You got to use the podium when you can. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Joel Anderson, for engaging this community on a topic that we need to be engaged in. Happy holidays. See you in January.